Good morning, everyone, and thank you again for joining. Today we are joined by Lynley Lischner, who is the General Manager of the Communicators. Before I pass over to her, this webinar is being recorded and we will have the link available later on this afternoon. Please forgive us for any technical difficulties. I'm doing Lynley's slides today just because it just wasn't working. So we will see how we go. Over to you, Lynley.
Thank you so much, Rihanna. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and my apologies as well. We seem to be operating, but then we hit a hitch. So welcome, and I hope you are all enjoying your post-COVID 3 lockdown 2 new era for us as we head into the next few weeks. I hope you've enjoyed a little bit of positive thinking. So today we are looking at and talking about preparing for future communications opportunities. It feels like an interesting topic when we're not really certain about the future, but I'll try and share some thoughts with you. Just a little bit about my background. I have worked in corporate organisations in both marketing and brand marketing roles. I have had a previous career to that was in law, and now I'm in recruiting. So probably, if anything, I can demonstrate that there are always opportunities to take a pivot in your career or look for other opportunities as different things occur. So just kicking into it, let's just start with a little bit of an interesting image where we can talk about the future. For sure, the future is going to be different, but we don't really know what that looks like. I guess we're being bombarded with many, many messages, but we don't have a crystal ball, and no one knows for certain what the impact on our community, society, or the economy will be. I guess we're all getting a lot of subliminal messaging. I know for sure that the recruitment industry has seen a decline in the number of roles that are available for people to apply for. We've had roles that have been postponed, and that is a very natural thing that you would expect in this environment. But for sure, I think it is a time to take stock and to think about what should we do in this environment when we've got the time to probably reflect and look at things a little bit differently. So whether you're joining today as a graduate, whether you are in a role, whether you are an experienced PR professional or communications professional, I'm going to cover a few things that will just make us think and pause, and really they apply to this time or any time in the future. And I'm feeling really awkward that I haven't got control of my slides, so back to Rihanna, and we will have a look at about what we're going to talk about today. By the way, I hope you like that image. I thought it's actually really nice, and I have to say that there's been a lot of stress for many people and a lot of uncertainty, but I think there's also been a lot of great stuff that's come out of the last few weeks, and I think we are or could look forward to a really nice positive future. So today's content, is this a new reality, and how do we think that we're going to be impacted as a profession? I'd like to talk about getting into a great headspace, because absolutely, if you've been personally impacted, whether you're in a role or whether you are looking for a role, there's been a lot of pressure, and the uncertainty makes us all feel a little bit stressed, and it's very, very hard to move forward when you are in that space. We're going to look at that. We're going to talk about getting prepared, what we could be doing in this time, and then we'll have a pause for some questions. Then I'm going to talk about actually what you could do to prepare to look for a new opportunity or a new role. And I'm going to cover off a little on the tips and tools that help you get there. So you'll see here that I have mentioned CVs, LinkedIn, letters of application, interviews. but I'm touching on those today. They are actually, big topics in their own right, and there are many courses, many specialists, and many opportunities to really spend some time on those things. So we'll just have a light touch on those, but overall we're going to have a look at some context now. Onto the new slide. So look, is this a new reality or is it just a moment in time? And as I've mentioned, we don't really know. We're getting a lot of commentary, and as I say, anecdotally, we know that there's a lot of people who've come back from overseas who are also now in the market and looking for opportunities. I know that there are a lot of people who have been impacted already and are looking for opportunities. But we don't really know. These are predictions. The recent Brand's Corporate Reputation Index, which has been recently published, said that nearly 2/3 of New Zealanders are anticipating the country will take more than 6 months to return to normality. I think that's probably a conservative estimate, and it's not actually certain what normality looks like. And also often in recession type environments, you would always see a bit of a lead and lag in terms of employment and role opportunities coming back through. Absolutely, I think there was an immediate reaction at the beginning of COVID, and many employers didn't know how they were going to be able to navigate their way through. Thankfully for support and assistance, people have been able to retain their roles, albeit on lesser salaries in some instances. Unemployment, you can see the statistics there, and predictions. They are just predictions, and that could either be conservative. But I think out of all of this, wherever it lands, I think there has been a shift in the way that employers are thinking about how to work or how to navigate their workforces in a new environment. So this potentially raises opportunities for our profession and other employees as well. There's a level of trust and knowing that employees can manage working remotely. It's more about outputs than time spent. So I think there is a big opportunity here for us to change the way we work, and perhaps to bring in some of those things that we've really valued over this time, flexibility, managing our time in and around families and other pressures. And I think if we can take that forward into new work environments and new roles, that's going to be a great thing for everyone. So let's have a look at what we should be doing or could be doing right now. And I think it is actually now, if you are feeling stressed and feeling that it's going to be very difficult to get into the right headspace to even start looking for a new opportunity. And let's face it, who wants to go into the market or start proactively contacting potential employers when they're in the process of restructuring their teams, making people redundant? That's a difficult thing to enter into. So look, now is a good time to get into a good headspace. Take a breath and look at building your confidence so you can move forward, and to think about what opportunities there could be for you in the next period of time. So we're going to have a look at reflecting on your achievements, investing in your well-being, asking for help, embracing resilience, and being generous. One of the really important things in scenarios like this, when you may be feeling pressure or you're thinking as a graduate, how am I even going to get my first job? Or if I've been in a job and I don't have a role any longer, it's important to accept that this is not your fault. It is nothing that you've done. It is not something that's within your control. And accepting that and realizing there are many other people in the same situation, whether that feels of comfort, actually does help you to start thinking about your next steps. So if you could, and moving into the next slide, Brianna, if we could start being able to think about, as a good step forward, reflecting on our successes and past achievements. So a really good way to do that, and I think we've probably all done it, is looked at our LinkedIn endorsements and connections. They're great validations of our success and the role that we've played in a previous organisation. Awards and recognition, employer references, or if you're a graduate, lecturer feedback, or projects that you've been involved in. Previous or current colleagues are a great way to just have a conversation and validate and talk about some of the things that you have done and why they work well. And naturally, your friends and family are always a great place to go for further support and validation of yourself. But out of this, look, writing something down and actually looking at these and writing down your 3 key strengths, or however many you want to write, is a really important way to help you build your confidence and enable you to move forward. And actually identifying those significant projects and examples, again, an opportunity for you to reflect, gather those, so that when you are in a good place and you are able to start thinking about your CV, applying for roles, you've already cemented in your mind that you are great, that you do have the skills for the role that you're applying for and what they are. The next thing that everyone is talking about is investing in your health and well-being. And next slide, Brenda. Thank you. Investing in your health and well-being. And I know everyone is talking about it, and there is myriads of places you can go to hear why that is important and how to go about that. But in these times, it is probably very easy to fall into a bit of a slump. So staying connected and keeping a routine will enable you to actually get into that zone or the mindset so that you can actually start a process and then a plan for what you are going to do to be able to move forward. So whether that's getting a new role or whether that's not in your new role, it doesn't really matter. The same levels of anxiety, uncertainty, new things that are going on are there. So and doing those things is really, really important thing to do. Now, the next slide, we talk about the importance of asking for help. I know that sounds like a very simple thing, and of course you're going to do it, but in fact, in my experience in recruitment, and often people don't like asking directly for help. If they have a mentor or a coach that they've got through university or have taken on, that seems a really valid place to go, and that could be really important for you at the moment. But if you don't have that, using even LinkedIn as a key touch point for recruiters and potentially other people who are looking for candidates, state at the top of your LinkedIn profile that you are open or looking for opportunities. Going to ex-colleagues or previous employers, not necessarily say, do you have a job or a role for me, but actually to say, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I think I'm looking for, and if you know of anyone, please can you give me an introduction, and just really be able to connect with previous mentors and also recruitment professionals who at this time should be providing support to candidates. So please do ask for that help. It is really important. People won't be able to help you if you haven't told them where you're at and what you're looking for. I can't emphasize that enough, really. Moving on to the next slide and thinking about embracing resilience. Again, using the word resilience often feels like a further blow when you are just trying to hold tight to where you're at. You're not sure of your future employment. But there's again been much written on of how you react to an event that has gone on can quite often determine the outcome. So what do I mean by that in this situation? Is that if you're able to open yourself up and see now as potentially a gift, then you are opening your mind and your attitude to possibility. And an example of that is just recently with the Bauer closure. I've seen a group of journalists from there group together and come up with an online magazine concept capsule, which is really, really fantastic. So they've used this moment in time and really quickly pulled together to build something which may help determine their future career direction. So often out of adversity comes opportunity, and that's a really good thing to hold on to when you're trying to build, I guess, a good state of mind to be able to go forward and look for roles. Then my next slide is, again, an interesting one to say about how you can prepare for opportunities. This is all contextual around state of mind, because your state of mind is absolutely critical when you start applying for opportunities and the way you present yourself, the story you tell. Being generous, we've heard a lot about being kind, but I think being generous has equally been evident over the past 6 or 7 weeks. By giving your time, either to support someone who isn't in a role and who is looking, or if you are in a role and you are supporting, if you're not as well, by sharing connections, ideas, having conversations, you can sometimes come up with thoughts and ideas of new places to go to look for other opportunities, new people to contact. You can perhaps provide introductions. You can help. You can start thinking laterally about your career and where you want to go. So be open to that. Be generous with your time. Be generous in the sense of being open to supporting others and collaborating. I think it's a really good time to be doing that, and building out your network is good. So next slide. Getting prepared. So as mentioned earlier, we don't know exactly what is going to play out in terms of the job market, nor indeed for PR and communications professionals in terms of, will those opportunities shrink? Will they indeed expand? So we're going to have a look at that. And in this environment, given the uncertainty, what do we think that employers are going to be looking for? And given that, how do we close any skill gaps that we might have while we've got the time to actually do that? So first of all, gathering insights. Back up, please. Yeah. There are plenty of ways that you can do this through the media and all of your social channels. We are certainly not short of information or places we can go to find out what is actually going on in our communities, for the economy, for businesses, for organisations. So gather that information, because we want to know what industries have been impacted and affected the most, so that we can start planning and thinking about where will we go, where will we target, what other skill sets might I need to be able to build up my qualifications and my opportunity to apply for particular roles. So these are just touching on, I think, opinions too. There's plenty of opinions, but as PR and communications professionals, we are expected to have knowledge and understanding of what is going on in the market. And talking to friends, family, colleagues, and just hearing their opinions help us to understand sentiment, and sentiment informs a lot of what we do. So that's really, really important to use this time to research and gather insights. And moving down to the next slide. Apologies again, everyone. This is very, very awkward, not having control. Never mind. So thinking strategically, what do we mean by that? I think I've just touched on it in the previous slide, is I think PR professionals and communications professionals, I believe, have really stood up and stood out over the last 6 to 7 weeks. There have been many organisations that have played a very big role in helping support the way that our communities and people have been able to navigate through these really difficult times. So PR professionals and comms professionals, if you are looking and getting prepared for your next opportunity, you need to be able to be very aware of and have thought about some of these questions. So what changes are happening in society due to COVID, and what will this mean for communications professionals? And what businesses and organisations are likely to suffer the most, and what sectors could benefit? And what will consumers be looking from brands? And how is the sector you are in impacted? And what will that mean or could mean for the role that communications plays? So let's have a look at those one by one. So looking at what changes are happening in society, and what could this mean for communications professionals? I'm sure you'll be all very well aware of the changing rapidly and evolving media landscape. So Bauer, I guess, was a real blow and a very, very visible impact to our media fragmentation with further mergers and closures. We've also seen, and this is not necessarily a COVID thing, but I think it has been sped up because of this, is we know that consumers are using other channels, digital channels, to reference and source their truth and their information. So this inevitably has an impact on communications professionals and also the skills that you need given that environment. The other thing that I think has changed and something we should consider out of what we've seen from a lot of New Zealand's high-profile organisations, the Air New Zealand's, the supermarkets, is that they have been very, very focused on making sure that their consumers know that they're there for them, so they know why they exist for their consumers. They've built trust in the minds of their consumers by indicating how they behave with their employees and how they behave in terms of following the requirements of lockdowns. So corporate reputation is not going to go away, and this is a really potentially a big opportunity for PR professionals to, I guess, if not already, but to claw back a lot of thought leadership. And what I mean by this is through leadership communications, PR professionals have the opportunity to really help guide and influence consumers. And whilst we have done this, I think the role of PR has become way more visible again. And it's really nice to see that they have played a really fantastic role on behalf of brands during this time. Potentially the other could be conversely, it could be that we could see a shrinking or specialisation of PR and communications roles. You know, will PR professionals be grouped into crisis management or government relations or financial reporting? I don't think so, but that is up to the profession to stand up and to take ownership of actually this situation is a really big opportunity and to be able to influence businesses about how important their role is. Further merging of PR and other disciplines, and what I mean by that is there has been, I think, in the market a little bit of crossover between marcoms, digital comms and PR. I think each have a role to play and there are certainly crossovers, but it would be great to see the PR profession really taking on these other skills, so digital competency, and building out some other opportunities in their toolkit, like community engagement, to be able to embrace what's going on in the future. So just quickly, looking at the next slide, I think anyone who's done a little bit of thinking and has read enough will absolutely understand what is going on for different sectors. But again, this helps you to refine your thinking and think about where you might look for opportunities and where there could be opportunities in the future. So I'm not going to go through those individually, but it's pretty obvious where the opportunities could be. So again, to the next slide, just recapping really, what will consumers expect for brands? They'll expect them to be purpose-driven. They'll need to reassure consumers and communicate more than ever. Big opportunity for PR and communications. And playing leadership is a really important thing as well. So then moving on to the possibility for communications. I think I've probably covered most of these off, but thought leadership, absolutely. change management, that is an ongoing thing. With digital transformation, there is always change management opportunities. But I think change management, community and stakeholder engagement are going to be increasingly important in the next period, particularly if we can hold on to the great comms that we have seen in the last while. And of course, internal communications has become increasingly important. And again, I think there has been a number of internal communications roles that have become available over this period as organisations have acknowledged the need to keep their people informed, and that will continue. So if that is your bag and something that you feel particularly interested in, then that is something that I think will be really cemented in most industries as we go forward. So moving on to the next slide, and just having a quick look again, if this is a new world in our post-COVID environment, has it really changed? No, but has there been, I guess, some more focus and refinement of what employers will be looking for? Adaptability for sure, but that has been an ongoing thing, and then you can see from that quote from Future of Jobs Report 2018, employees who are adaptable are more likely to achieve better outcomes as priorities shift or setbacks occur, since they're already comfortable in, I guess, a shifting environment. And that's interesting that was pre-COVID. So I think that is a certainty and a core skill that recruiters are looking for is adaptability. I think that has just been expedited. What we are, back up there. What we are always looking at when interviewing and looking for experienced communications professionals, or even people who are looking for any action level role, is thought leadership. And again, I just want to emphasize what that means. It means that you are thinking about the role that you can play in guiding the organisation forward, and how can you influence that. Andrew Pyrie has said that to me in the past. He was ex-corporate affairs director at Spark, and he, to paraphrase his quote, businesses will seek out PR comms practitioners who can demonstrate thought leadership, who take ownership, who add value beyond the immediate task or responsibility of the role. And if that is one thing you can hold on to out of this conversation today, although it's not a conversation, I'm awkwardly talking to a screen, that is it, is thinking. And that was why I put the topic at the start of this section, think strategically. PR and comms people have to be able to demonstrate thinking and to understand impacts, to understand consumer sentiment. And you have to be able to demonstrate that as you move forward in this environment. Also relevancy, touched on the changing media landscape, changed how audiences are finding their information. Charlene White, she runs a Digi-PR course through Prince and privately. It is very, very worth your while as a PR practitioner to understand more digital. And I could highly recommend that going forward, that is not going to go away, and to build your skills in this area is very, very important in a post-COVID environment or not. So moving on to the next slide. So given what employers potentially are looking at, maybe the opportunity, the opportunity is, we are down on the next slide, is to start thinking about, well, if these are the industries that are going to be able to continue, if not grow over the next period of time, and these are the kind of skills that I would need for those positions, start thinking about them and identifying them, and then go through a process of developing an ongoing learning plan. Identify those gaps. Think about where you don't have experience and skills. And I know I'm talking broadly to potentially graduates, potentially people who've got a lot of experience, potentially people who are 1 or 2 years in. You'll know what is relevant and right for you for where you're at. You'll know what experience you already have if you've already been in a role. And you may have seen already from this conversation that there is an opportunity for you to do some upskilling and more learning while you've got the time. And I've just touched on some examples, and there are certainly plenty of places you can go to get that further upskilling. So just at this point, we're just going to take a breather. I feel like I need one after we go off to a bit of a rough start. And I'd really like to hear your thoughts and take some questions if you have any at this point before we head into the next section, which is more on the tools for you to start being able to apply positions.
So if you have any questions, feel free to just pop them into the sidebar of the GoToWebinar panel, and I will ask them. Oh, yes, they can be. Slides can be available later. Is that okay, Lynley?
For sure.
The recording will be available as well. All right. I think we'll just give this a little bit longer. It doesn't look like there's any questions coming in at this stage. We will do questions at the end of the presentation as well, though. So we've just had a question come in. Keen to understand more about those industries impacted and thriving.
Look, I think that is really, I have pulled what I have really understood from what's going on in the market. So if you take travel and leisure, clearly with our borders closed, we have seen an immediate impact to that sector and that industry. And so we've seen immediate flow-on effect to, downstream businesses, whether that's the hotel sector, flight centre, Air New Zealand, been significant number of redundancies and changes there. So it will take potentially some time for those organisations to move through the impacts that they've had. So what I'm suggesting is that those industries that I highlighted are just quite simply not likely to be recruiting in the immediate future. Or they may have identified gaps that they've had in their communications teams, and they may be looking to fill those opportunities. For example, internal communications could be an example. It could be that if you are working in an agency, that just having context of the industries that are likely to be impacted and those that are likely to thrive is that you will be able to advise your clients and think about comms in a way that meets where they're at right now. So, the way you're communicating if you're in the luxury sector is not going to be jumping up and down and suggesting through your communications that everyone should be enjoying their luxury experiences, because that is not appropriate in an environment where people are suffering and have lost their opportunities. So those slides were contextual around what you need to think about, both in terms of being a PR or comms practitioner in a role and how you need to think more sensitively given the context and the environment which we're in. And if you are looking for an opportunity, where should you look? Where could there be opportunities and what value could you potentially add? I hope that answers that.
I think so, yes. Do you have any examples of New Zealand PR professionals who do thought leadership well?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think I won't name any names, but I think we can mention some of the companies that we've seen some really good, and I think you'll know who they are if I mention the companies anyway, is Air New Zealand. I think has been extraordinary in their consistent communications from woe to going through this and through very, very difficult decisions that they've had to deal with, their timeliness, their appropriateness. So I think that has been really, really interesting. I think the supermarkets have demonstrated some great thought leadership through their actions and their communications. I think Kiwi Bank is another example of a brand that has been appropriate and demonstrated great support. So there's been a number, I think, of PR professionals who have demonstrated their ability to ensure that the messages are clear, that the timing is right, and that they're focused on the humanness of the situation and not talked about their own benefit, if that makes sense.
In terms of vacancies, are there many senior roles available, or are you seeing the senior roles disappearing?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think what we have seen, and anecdotally from speaking to other recruiters, is when this first happened, or the week before and the few weeks right into lockdown, we saw a lot of postponement of senior roles or put on hold, if not cancelled. But for communicators, we in the last 2 weeks have seen an increase in our briefs, and that's really, really encouraging. And whilst they're of, I guess, a breadth of roles through from digital marketing, internal comms, contracts, through to some part-time contract roles, it is really encouraging to see that there are still roles that are being briefed. And I think that is really about organisations having identified some gaps that they've got, or that they may be in a sector that hasn't been directly impacted, and in fact they're in a place where they need to upscale their content and communications. With agencies, I think that is definitely going to be a hold, wait and see environment, as they are dependent on their clients understanding how things are going to play out for them. So if you're a graduate and hoping to get an agency role, look, by all means, you can be looking and searching and keeping your eyes and ears open, but I think that you'll see a little bit of a slowdown on those roles.
And I think we'll just do one last question before we move back onto the rest of the presentation. What are the possible strategies for social media content, and is it good to use content related to COVID-19 and the product?
Now you're getting really into comms responses versus looking for opportunities. I think I understand the question, and I think that's really, really important and interesting, and I'll just reflect back to my comment around timing, appropriateness, very much dependent on the industry, and it doesn't really matter whether it's digital mainstream content. It's about the message and being appropriate in your timing with that. But certainly, if you want to discuss more, I can direct you to people who are talking about that a lot, and we can potentially address that at the end of this as well. I think it's probably good just to continue or kick on into the opportunities and how you position yourself for those, and happy to go back to that one at the end if you like.
Perfect. Cool. We do have a number of other questions, but we'll save those until the end. Good.
Right. You are doing brilliantly, Rihanna, trying to navigate your way through these slides. And I hope everyone isn't finding it too clumpy and too awkward. So down we go.
All right.
So now going into the next part, which I suppose is a little bit more of the tactical, what can you do to position yourself, whether you're in a current role, whether you're seeking new opportunities. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to touch on some tips and tools. It is by no means a comprehensive look at all of those tools, such as CVs, interviews, but I will give you highlights and some thinking from my point of view when I meet and interview candidates, and things that come to mind for me. So let's kick into this. And I just want to touch on, next slide. Where's she gone? Oh, there we are. Okay, so I just want to touch on if you're in a role, because there is likely people listening who are currently in a role. I think if you haven't worked it out yourself, it is time to demonstrate your value. And in the previous slides and earlier conversation, I talked about the importance of the role that a PR and communications professional plays in an organisation and the role it can play. And I think we have seen in the past few years of PR often being about a lot of tactical content generation, potentially consumer campaigns, which I guess, yeah, I'm going to use the word tactical, but the value that PR professionals have shown and brought to the fore again is the strategic thinking and the value you can add to the overall business. So reinforce that in your role, if you are in a role. Show your thought leadership and your strategic thinking by developing some thinking and ideas that you can offer within your agency or within your team. And if you are a graduate, you can also use some thinking to demonstrate the way you think when you go into an interview. So show your adaptability. We talked about that earlier. And in this environment, it may be, if your team is short of members, if you get a role that was going to be filled, but it hasn't been because of COVID, or you have lost team members, it's really important that you can show transferability of skills. Can you pick up the internal communications? Can you do some government relations? Can you step into stakeholder engagement? What is it in your role that you already do, but you have the skills, but your role hasn't immediately required of you, but you can broaden your remit? Also, not a time to rest on your laurels, even if you are in a role. Really good time to be thinking about what courses should I be doing? How should I be upskilling myself given the changes in the environment and skill gaps that I've had that I just haven't knuckled down to actually undertake? And you all know here today, Prinz runs a number of courses that everyone can access, member or not, most often, and many other institutions that provide further training. So importantly too, even if you are happily in your role and incredibly busy, stay connected with your professional networks. The PR and communications profession is actually relatively small and often very well connected, thanks to professional networks like Prinz. So these are opportunities for you to gather intelligence and to share your learnings and find out about opportunities that may come available. Moving on to the next slide, and if you are in a situation where you are seeking a new opportunity, now is the time to plan and also be flexible. We've had a number of candidates, or seen and heard from a number of candidates who have come back from overseas roles. As I said before, there are a lot more people on the market and there are more people looking for opportunities. And so I've noticed that they have had no choice but to approach us and say, I'm very flexible. I will look at a contract. I will look at some freelance. I will look at, 1 or 2 days a week, whatever it is that is required, I will look at it. And I will also look at roles that don't sit perfectly within my passion or my immediate past skills and experience. So that attitude and that starting point for thinking about new opportunities is probably a really good one to have. I'll go on to contradict myself on that shortly when I'm going to talk about getting very, very clear about yourself and where you're going. And secondly, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you look for or take a role that doesn't sit comfortably with you, or it is something that you are not passionate about pursuing or being part of. But you can start your research through online platforms like Seek, start seeing what opportunities are being advertised, approach recruiters that you have met or spoken to, or you can find that are sitting in your area that you're interested in. And as I say, Communicators very much specialises in PR, communications and marketing, as well as digital roles. So we are very familiar with people and your colleagues in the profession who are looking for opportunities, who are also in very, very good roles that we do proactively reach out to. If we have a specific candidate, we know who's available and has a certain set of skills that they could be looking for. You need to do some research and start thinking of yourself about salaries. So while you can get that information often from recruiters, there's other people and other ways that you can find out where you are placed. And I think it is also a time, and we've seen with the government subsidies and organisations retaining people but on a reduced salary, that this is something that we've got to be open to going forward, is that this is not a time where salary is going to be increasing significantly. I don't see the market putting downward pressure on, though. That isn't what I think will happen going forward, but I think we might see a period of stability there. So direct approach. Again, in New Zealand, we talk about 2 degrees of separation and how small the market is. So if you have got contacts and you are able to make a direct approach to previous employers or ex-colleagues, that is great, but consider your approach and consider the timing of that approach. As I mentioned before, companies and organisations and agencies are going through very, very difficult times with their current business and their employees and making people redundant. So think carefully about who you approach and when. And if you are making an approach, be able to demonstrate the value that you can give them, not what they can give you. So just think about that very carefully. Touched on being open to contracts with consultants. So whilst that may not be your ideal, it gives you often an opportunity to get into a role, to learn new skills, and often contracts are extended and can become permanent positions. So again, it's a good time to keep an open mind on that. The other thing I would say is, while you are looking and you have the time, volunteering does not help the bank balance. It doesn't help mortgage payments, but it does help with your contacts and your skills, and actually to demonstrate your ability to get out and make the most of an opportunity. And community opportunities have certainly been around, and you never know what that could throw up for you in terms of further networks and connections. Taking a role outside the PR or comms profession, not ideal after you've qualified, had a lot of experience, but actually maybe now is the time for you to think about, well, what else? Can I actually take a little bit of a career pivot? Can I extend my comms experience if I've been doing a lot of content generation and thinking about where consumers are, how to best reach them through consumer campaigns? I've been exposed to marketing through agencies I've worked with. Could you look at a marketing role? If you have very technical skills to your PR or comms experience, is there an opportunity for you to look at an advisory, at a consultancy kind of situation? Is change management something that you can do further qualifications in, or extend your internal communications exposure and experience into that? These are just some ideas, but some of the things that you could start thinking about and planning for and being able to be flexible on. And we've already talked about new further qualifications. So moving on, tips and tools. So we're just going to start into those because I'm very conscious that we are running out of time. So moving on to the next slide. Do this exercise for yourself, scribble on a piece of paper, whatever. Write down and identify your technical or your transferable skills, as I just talked about previously, your skills and your experience. Write that down. Write down your values, what is really important to you in a business or an agency or any environment that you wanting to work in? Is it in the healthcare industry? Is it, I guess, community, or is it FMCG, or where is it? Where does your heart and your passion lie? And what are some of the soft skills and qualities and attributes that you have? You know, are you a collaborator, a team player? Are you adaptable? So think of some of those attributes, record them, then start looking at industry sectors, as I've talked about before, and opportunities that might come up in what I'm calling a rebuild economy. And I think we've talked enough about that. The intersection of some of that thinking will help you start pulling out where an ideal role could sit for you. It doesn't mean that there is a role there for you, but it helps you in your planning and your narrowing down who you're going to talk to, the kind of roles that you're going to look for, and the people you connect with who are connected potentially to those industries. Moving on to the next slide. So in this environment, more than ever, it is really important that you develop your story. What makes you unique? And even if you have had to work outside of the industry for a while, even if you're not working at the moment, that is part of everyone's story now. So embrace that, because it makes you richer, those experiences that you have whilst you are looking for that next perfect opportunities. Again, another exercise. Write down what makes you stand out. Again, same values, soft skills, attributes. But most importantly, when a recruiter is interviewing or hearing, or an employer is hearing from a potential candidate, it's your story that is more important than your list of skills. They are really important, but a recruiter or an employer will have already identified before they meet you if you have the technical skills. What they're interested in is not just the head and the rational things that you do, but your heart and the things that really position you and make you stand out and make you the right, great candidate for their particular role. So do that exercise. I think one of the things you can ask yourself when you're doing that is, if I'm thinking about my positioning or my brand story, and I have been for an interview, what is it that the person I've met would reflect back about me in a single paragraph after I've communicated my values, my passion, and also my skills? What is it that they reflect back about me? And you need to condense that into your elevator pitch, if you like. So moving quickly down through the next, and these are going to be slides available, obviously. So, and again, this is not a comprehensive, this is how you write a CV. There is no right or wrong in my mind. I have named it the 4 Bs. Bespoke, absolutely tailor your CV to the role that you're applying for. You do need to keep search bots in mind. Communicators don't use AI. We use databases, our knowledge and our experience, but keywords are important for searches that other people may be using to identify candidates. Your CV needs to immediately inform the viewer. We are increasingly lazy in the content of how much we read and we scan. So balance appeal is also very, very important. Visually appealing and very easy to read the highlights. Keep it brief. And I guess the other word I've used is brilliance. So a way of thinking of this is to present your compelling career story in your CV like a teaser campaign. And I'm not talking about a whole lot of creative, and you certainly don't need to photograph yourself. You're selling your skills and experience, but not your image. But you can certainly use through language words and descriptors that express your uniqueness. And absolutely, your CV should be revealing your value, your expertise, your passion, and your successes, what you've been responsible for, but most importantly, or more importantly, your achievements. LinkedIn profile, next slide. Again, you'll note that I've said there are many ways you can write a brilliant LinkedIn profile. You can go to LinkedIn Learning to find and get great tips on that. I guess the message from me is just do it. Make sure you have got a great LinkedIn profile. And in this environment, actually say if you are looking, because in search, it's really handy to know if someone is open and available. And then it's also really handy to know in the upfront statement what they actually do. So we won't talk any more on that. You can look into that in a bit more detail. In a post-COVID world, next slide, now is absolutely the time to build your influence. And what I mean by that is your networks, connections. And actually, you could be developing a database of people that you are going to connect with once you have got yourself organised, you've done your thinking, you've got your tools in place to build your influence, and that means connecting with ex-colleagues and employers. And now you've got your story in place, you've got all your tools and equipment, your CV, your LinkedIn, you're ready to go, so you can start your appropriate networking and getting into finding that opportunity. And just quickly, and finally, we'll talk quickly about letter of application. Look, I'm not going to go through all of those. I'm, again, just very conscious that we're going over the time. I think it's very, very explicit what I would be looking for. This is not a definitive list or example, but it are some things that I look for from a candidate when I'm looking at a letter of application. And I think that example is a really great one, and the fact that it covers off all of those things that I think are really important for an employer to see, and really gives me a feel for the candidate, not just strengths and experiences, but personality as well. And then the interview. Look, many people underestimate the interview, and the interview starts from the moment you walk in the door, if not before, when you've had contact with a recruiter or employer to have the conversation. You need to prepare. Do you know about the organisation? Do you know the person you're going to be meeting and their background and details? Have you thought more about the role and potentially the opportunity, and why your experience is going to be able to be relevant and why you're the right person? As I said before, bring your personality, not a list. And you're not sitting there waiting for the interviewer to ask you what you think should be the interview questions. There are many different ways that an interviewer will learn and elicit information from a candidate. So bring yourself and relate your story. So take the opportunity to weave in your own examples, and whether you've been asked the question you can always weave in additional information that you think they should know, or that is validates why you are the right person for the role. My message just really simply is take ownership of the interview. Bring yourself, your whole self, your personality, and be prepared to share examples and stories that demonstrate everything that you've said in your CV that you have done and experienced, and how you've been successful in it. And that was a rush through last piece, but the slides and the information is relatively full. Rhianna, have we got time for questions, or where would you like to go?
I think we can definitely do a few questions. So we'll start off. We're all going to have gaps in our CV as a result of this. Previously, this may have been frowned on. What are your thoughts about how employers might regard gaps in future, or whether they might even ask candidates what they did during any COVID downtime?
Yeah, great. We touched on that in the presentation. I think employers will be very forgiving of CV gaps. It's natural and inevitable, and if they weren't forgiving, I'm not sure that there'd be an employer that you would want to have a conversation with. I think, though, it is really important to be able to demonstrate that you did take some action during that downtime, whether it's upskilling, whether it's volunteering, whether it's extending your networks, who you connected with, who you helped, who you supported,
have a story in and around that, not I sat at home and I found it really difficult. That probably wouldn't be a great response. But I do think employers will be forgiving, and me personally, as a recruiter, would never have any difficulty seeing a candidate who had a gap over this period of time.
Cool. And what do you see as the ongoing situation for contract work in the comms field, and what might that look like?
Yeah, I'd love to have a crystal ball, and I can only speak to what I have seen in the last 3 to 4 weeks when, as I mentioned, we started getting briefs again. And it's been a real mixed bag of full-time positions, part-time, people saying we don't know what we need yet, which makes it difficult to approach candidates and say they don't know what they need yet. But that is that flexibility piece I was talking about before. You need to be open to that, and to be open and understanding of employers being uncertain what they can manage at this time. And I think we have seen an increase in the number of digital comms roles that have become available. So that's been very interesting for me. And that's certainly, something that we are very, very focused on, is ensuring all of our candidates are focused on upskilling in digital. And as I mentioned before, Charlene runs a DigiPR course, and I think it's really worthwhile candidates thinking about that or others to upskill themselves.
Perfect. And I know there are a few questions coming in about digital PR and specific courses focused around that as well.
Yeah. Maybe we can add a link to other courses that are aware of through PRINS, and potentially add some others as well. We definitely offer them with Charlene White presenting for our candidates, and we'll likely be doing another one in the future. We obviously haven't been able to do them in the office, so we might be able to do another one down the track as well. But I know PRINS have also offered them, so that's great.
Yeah, definitely. We've been running them online with Charlene, and I know she's got a few new ones coming up later on in the year. They are still scheduled for in-person at the moment, but we will see. So,
just while you're looking at the questions, I also would like to mention for comms and PR professionals, just a bit of a plug. Commspros.nz is again another place where a lot of comms professionals are gathering to see some experienced and senior comms practitioners discuss how they are managing comms in their environments at the moment, and there's some really good content there, so leap on and have a look.
So there is, with the return of many overseas-based Kiwis, do you think it will be an employer's market for a long time, and will salaries suffer?
Again, absolutely, undoubtedly, more candidates coming into the market from overseas will have an impact. Again, it's only anecdotal from what I have seen, is that I've seen a lot of marketing people come back into the country more than PR. So I think there's a real squeeze on marketing opportunities potentially. But in PR practitioners, I've seen probably them returning at more the senior end of experience, and it potentially will be a lot more difficult for those senior practitioners, the very senior practitioners, to find an opportunity. Salaries, I am hoping, look, we've talked about subsidy and talked about what that's meant, and I'll reference again flexibility and being open to the fact that organisations will not be looking to pay in large salaries or increases from the market in the next short period of time. I would hate to see a decrease, but in fact, in some ways that has happened in agency worlds where people have taken a reduction in salaries already. and different organisations have managed that differently, whether they've used holiday time or 4-day weeks. And I think being flexible and open is perhaps a 4-day weeks with prorated salaries may become a little bit more of a trend.
And do you think employers will be more open to flexible and part-time employees or contractors in the future? After this COVID-19 period, are employers more open to employing parents with young or school-aged children and people who want a better work-life balance?
Totally think that employers will be more open to flexible work practices. It's just wonderfully encouraging to see and to hear how well it has worked for many organisations. And I think they've probably been quite surprised at how readily their people have stood up and been able to cope working from home. And they've built trust around that. So yes, I do hope that they will continue to be more open to people's different circumstances, whether it's mums or dads who need to work from home, need to work a shorter week. Personally, at Communicators, we have already seen quite a lot of openness to that anyway. I think in the PR profession particularly, because if you are a PR professional, you're often on, or on, you know what I mean, is that you have to be available. And as long as you are available at those core times, then I think flexible work practices had started to become a bit of a more acceptable thing anyway, and that is so encouraging.
How much support and contact can we expect at the moment from recruitment agencies, especially if they're not that busy, or should they be in contact with us? And if they're not, is that a bad reflection on us as candidates?
That's a good question. Okay, again, I'm not going to speak to other recruitment agencies. I have been in recruitment just over a year and a half. I've come from a corporate background. I don't think I can speak to the industry as such. I do hear stories sometimes. I'll talk to my approach is the way we operate is we're very personalised. So if someone contacts us, and look, just to give context so people feel better if people don't get contacted, in 1 year I met and interviewed 450 people in 1 year. Candidates face to face. That's not happening at the moment. It's usually a phone call in the last 6 weeks. But pre to that, I would meet because we want, as I've tried to demonstrate, meeting someone and getting a sense of their story is as important as understanding their skills. So our approach is to ideally get to know and understand candidates as individuals, whether or not there's a role for them at the time or not. Yes, you should hear back if you've applied for a role. You should get a message of encouragement and support before you interview. You should get a follow-up call. You should be informed throughout the whole process. The difficulty and the gap often comes when a person has applied for a role and then they haven't been shortlisted, but they're still there. I think the numbers I gave you before gives you an indication of how many people a recruiter may be seeing, but simply top of mind. I ask my candidates to give me a call back every few weeks if they haven't heard from me. So that takes the onus away from me. I'm proactively calling every single person I meet, but it does put responsibility in the hands of the person to contact me. And undoubtedly, those who do become cemented in my mind so that if a role does come up, they're going to be top of mind. So hopefully that gives you a clue of the action you could take with recruiters. Without becoming a pest, you can actually just touch base. And I have many candidates who do that.
And I think we'll make this one the last question. Do you have any advice for senior communications professionals in terms of countering ageism?
Yes, well, from the sounds of that question, they've experienced ageism. And look, let's not sugarcoat it. It is alive and well. But I think it's really important. It's that resilience thing that I said before, is try and let go of that as a contextual thing for you when you start applying. I know it's really hard to remove that, but the onus does come on the candidate to, I'm going to say again, bring to life their story in such a way that age does not become even a consideration. So if I could end by saying, I really encourage you to think about building your story, a really compelling story. And everybody has one. I don't want to hear that no one has one. And I put a tool in the presentation where you can start. We run courses on that and offer that as a service as well, personal brand development. If you're really stuck on it, and you can always contact us and we can look at helping you further. But build that and then try and remove any negatives that a potential employer will have by taking ownership of your story up front. So hopefully that helps. I'm really happy to take other questions and get back to people if necessary, if we haven't addressed them all, Rihanna. But thank you everyone for tuning up today, and apologies for that really rocky start. And Rihanna having to sort that out.
So thank you, and that was very helpful, I'm sure, to a lot of people, and a lot of great tools in there as well. As I mentioned earlier, the webinar is being recorded, so the recording will be sent out later on with the slides as well. So I think that's everything. Thank you. Cool. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.